Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Today's topic, we are going to be discussing automating cannabis operations and how robotics improve efficiency, compliance, and scalability. And before I dive in, I'm just going to share a little bit about my background. I got my start working in the cannabis industry in 2009, running and operating vertically integrated operations here in Colorado. And in 2015, I founded ICS Consulting, and I have been helping cannabis operators across the United States for the last 10 years in navigating the regulatory landscape. And let's everyone give a warm welcome to my next guest, Nohtal Partansky. And Nohtal is the CEO and founder of Sorting Robotics. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here today. I think you have a really interesting company and background. If you would not mind sharing with our listeners about how you came to working in the cannabis industry.
Sure. Yeah. So my background personally is I'm an engineer by trade. Got my master's degree in aerospace engineering. Eventually worked at NASA for a few years. Worked on a project that's currently on the surface of Mars, producing oxygen from the Martian atmosphere. And then in the last year of my tenure at NASA, I started this company, Sorting Robotics. But we weren't in the cannabis industry. As you might assume, cannabis and NASA don't really mesh well together.
Sure.
But we initially were doing robotics for inventory management, specifically like for trading cards. And so we did that for a couple of years. And then I had a few friends that were starting cannabis companies in 2019, like right after California went legal. And it was pretty hot. It was pretty trendy. And there was like a lot of momentum behind it. And so we decided to sell the first part of the business and then focus everything into cannabis. And we went through a startup accelerator called Y Combinator and then raised some capital back at the end of 2019. And then in 2020, I became fully focused on building robots for cannabis manufacturers and spun out the first part of the product. Yeah, since 2020, we've been fully focused on that. I actually took some time off in the mid 2020 from sorting, helped put up a cannabis co-packing company in Oakland. And then I ran that for a few years with my partners, separate from sorting robotics, but it allowed me to gain a lot of information and knowledge and understanding about the industry and like what it's like to be a plant touching operator. And yeah, like at this point, 6 years deep into the cannabis industry and 3 years spent as a plant touching operator and then 6 years spent as an ancillary kind of support for the industry. So yeah, I know a lot about manufacturing in the cannabis industry.
That's amazing. I think very smart in getting that plant touching experience.
Yeah.
I think it helps you have a better understanding of all the pain points that operators and what they're up against. Love having that edge. I think it's an important edge in order to, I guess, help customers or clients better and helping them kind of work through their issues and processes as far as manufacturing. So I think that I didn't realize that you were plant touching for a while. That's really cool that you
Yeah,
did
I had
that.
brand and everything with the Hall of Flowers a bunch of years. It
Oh
was
my
cool.
gosh.
Yeah.
That is so cool. That is really cool. What a great experience. I want to like jump in here with you. And one of my questions was I know you went from aerospace engineering to NASA and then you founded a cannabis automation company. Were there any parallels that you were seeing between the two worlds? And then what drew you to build technology specifically for cannabis manufacturers?
Maybe I'll answer the second one first.
Yeah.
So I've always been interested in cannabis. And actually, when I was at NASA, I had a friend who I had actually started a previous company with. That one didn't really work out. It was like a 3D printing company. But he got into the cannabis industry on the terpene side. And so when I was working at JPL, in my early years of JPL and NASA, I was like, oh, is there something that like I can build and like help on? And he was more like on the flavors and stuff like he wasn't really like plant touching. He was still ancillary himself. And so I was just like very interested in it because like I don't drink really much at all. And I've been a fan of cannabis the whole time. And so even when I was in graduate school, again, I saw Colorado and Washington turn. I was like, damn, how do I like what do I do in that industry? What is there for an engineer to do there? And that was before I knew about the industry and know what to build. Like now I'm like, damn, I wish if I like had the information that I had that I gained in 2020, 2021 back in 2015. Oh man, I would have built stuff like 5 years, just 6 years earlier. But so I was always just interested in the plant, interested in the medicinal effects. And I was always like a recreational user, much less so while I worked at JPL. But um, yeah, so I was always like a fan. I always want to see like where I fit into that piece of the puzzle because it's not immediately obvious.
Yeah.
So that's like why I chose cannabis. In terms of the parallels that I see between cannabis and aerospace, there are not many, to be honest.
It's probably
Uh,
like complete opposites of each other.
yeah, like I would say the cannabis industry, it's a highly regulated industry, which is similar to aerospace, where aerospace is regulated for a different reason and security. But those regulations embody themselves very differently in those industries. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say there's like a whole ton of overlap. I would say the only thing that I use in terms of my knowledge base to transfer over, and I think it's more of an aspirational thing for the cannabis industry
Mhm.
to bring the cannabis industry to the level of sophistication of aerospace. So, like, I approach them very similarly, where I think the cannabis industry is used to just like having basement backyard engineering.
Yeah.
And me and my company, we approach it from like a NASA aerospace perspective where we make sure things are done right. We make sure things work, provide the level of customer support that we had in the aerospace industry. And we're very sophisticated and we want to make sure that our customers are either at the level of sophistication that we are, or we can bring them up to the level of sophistication. Because eventually, either it's this year, 5 years, or 10 years, cannabis will be a well refined pharmaceutical
Mhm.
industry. Or maybe there'll be like some sort of pharmaceutical, non pharmaceutical sort of thing. But whatever, it's going to be a well defined process that gets permutated throughout the rest of the world. We're here to help that path along the way.
Yeah, I really like what you said. I think about a facility that's testing products, and let's just say prior to the cannabis industry, somebody came over and they were working in an FDA approved lab, and they came over to the cannabis industry. A lot of people that I meet like that came from those labs, they are very stringent in how they run their labs and their testing protocols and how they process, validate everything in
Yeah.
that lab versus sometimes I'll see labs where they not everybody has that background and the labs are not run in the same manner and they don't have people with the same backgrounds. You're just bringing a higher level into the cannabis industry and it's where it's heading, like you said, with potentially what's going to happen here in the next 1 to 2 years. We have rescheduling. I think eventually we'll hit the being federally legal. And what does it all mean? I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't think operators really have an idea what's going to happen, but
I don't think
if
anyone has an idea I don't think the
right,
regulators know what's going to happen. I don't think the operators know what's going to happen. I think it's probably going to be a shit show for a while, but like,
it
right,
is
it's,
lot,
trending
yeah.
in the right direction.
Yeah, and there's so much speculation out there. You have to discern through a lot of noise right now about it. At the end of the day, the operators are really going to need the support for
Yeah.
whatever is going to come because they're going to get pushed to they have to now operate at a higher level. And that's something I've always known that was going to happen, whether it's more federal standards, which not every operator is CGMP compliant. Some of them don't follow OSHA, although I know like California is pretty good with Cal OSHA, but not every state, not every operator even understands that they have to be following OSHA. We have quality management systems and ISO 9001 and just all these different things that people aren't even really thinking about or doing. For the people that are doing those things, I think they'll just be ready to move forward and they might not even make it. Even at that level, are they going to be able to handle what's going to be coming our way? I do think compliance is going to be a lot more strict than
Yeah.
what it is now. 100%.
Yeah. Right now, it's more of like a guideline from what it seems like.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, compliance is going to be a lot more well defined, especially when you have the FDA that will start regulating things and they like have a budget to go and enforce and ensure compliance and stuff like that. Yeah, I think the comment that you made about people coming in from other industries as like raising the bar, I think, yeah, there's a weird, at least on like the internet, when I see it, there's like this weird sentiment of, oh, we don't want other people ruining our cannabis industry. And I think, or I don't know, that sentiment is weird because it's so like regressive compared to the whole kind of movement of cannabis as being progressive and like
Evolving.
changing. Like, you want cannabis to be nationally, globally recognized as like a valid form of recreation and a valid form of medicine. So if you want the world to recognize those things, you need to follow the rules of the world, right? And so you
Yeah.
have to operate in a certain way that like is like professional and like respectable. And you hear that a lot where people are like, oh, like this guy, this like suit came in and is running the grow and he doesn't know how to grow weed. It's okay, cool, that's fine. But like it's not, it has to be an old school grower that's been like growing up in Humboldt for 20, 30 years. And this guy doesn't make any sense. Like it should probably be both, right? Like it should be like the old school grower guy who like knows what's going on and has been growing weed since he was like 13 in junior high or whatever. And the suit guy who's gonna track the cost of goods and understand that there's like cycles of things that like pertain to the rest of the company and how it operates, but they need to learn from each other as opposed to thinking that, oh, I know how to do this. It's no, you don't know how to grow weed. You don't know how to like run a cash flowing farm. Like
Yeah.
you know how to be like, you don't know how to pay taxes.
Yeah.
So it's two things, right? And I think people tend to be so tribal about it, or it's
It's
like,
true. I think you're speaking my language. I see it all the time. It's like we have the culture of cannabis,
yeah,
and there's like big, deeply rooted in history culture around cannabis. And a lot of people are very attached to that. And that really defines everything that they do, who they are in the cannabis industry, and even brands and how they grow. And we've gone through it in Colorado where you have, of course, we don't, obviously, California is the number one longest running of people growing and cultivating cannabis before Colorado. We have the old days of Colorado before we were very regulated, where people still have these old school growers who, sure, they're passionate and they can grow incredible cannabis, but then they're lacking the business side of cannabis. Like you said, the tracking, the data. We still have people in Colorado that I always say that they're in the cave, and I call it the cave, meaning that they're not tracking data. They don't know what's really driving all their sales. They're not trying new things to get customers in. They're just sitting in the cave and saying cannabis is going to sell itself. And we're just going to get the same people coming in shopping from us for the last 10 years. And we're going to keep doing the same thing that we've always been doing for 10 years. And we're not going to change. And I think that mentality, I don't think those people are going to make it. They're barely making it now in the cannabis industry. So I think you have to say, yes, if the culture is important and you want to make it part of your mission, at the end of the day, we are in the regulated cannabis industry. We're regulated. And then you have to run it like a real business and you have to pay taxes. And if you want to be successful, you have to have a toolbox of things, whether it's automation, tracking data, and doing marketing and branding or whatever it is to get your business out there. But I think sometimes I see that culture where people are like, oh, it needs to be this way. I just don't see it happening with the regulated side of the cannabis industry. I think there's always going to be community and culture and people coming together around cannabis. But the regulated side, we are going to become even more regulated than we are now. It's
yeah,
going to become harder for people. And if you can't handle the compliance now, how are you going to handle it in the next 5 years?
yeah. And also the culture is fine, but the culture
Yeah.
gonna change. Like that's the other thing that people seem to not remember. What was the culture of alcohol in like the 1930s? That was prohibition. That was
Mhm.
like gangsters. Like
It
you
was.
a drink, you went to a basement at the local barber shop and then hung out in like a smoke filled room with a bunch of bootleggers, right?
Oh, I'm
I'm sure,
sure.
yeah, I'm sure people there were like, oh yeah, bootlegging is life. It's like, yeah, but that's not how people drink White Claws now. They that's like it changes, right? It just like the culture changes and you have to be like okay with that. And especially when you're like advocating for so much change, And you're like, oh, but like, they can't ruin the culture. It's like, you are literally asking for it to change. Like, what do you want it to be illegal or do you want it to not? Like,
Yeah.
it, yeah, you are asking for it. You
Yeah.
literally are asking for the culture to change.
I think it comes with the territory. I think people say they want change, but I don't think they really mean it because when it happens, then everyone gets really uncomfortable. And if you really think about it, the alcohol industry is a great example because it's true. Bootlegging. I'm sure my Italian side of my family back in, I think it was like the 1800s when they were working on all the wine farms in South Jersey, there was all kinds of bootlegging going on in the early days. And now look at alcohol. Like you said, we're drinking White Claws. I can go into my grocery store and buy a
And
White Claw.
buzzballs. Are you gonna complain that like buzz balls are not they're not what alcohol is meant to be consumed? It's, dude, who cares? Like people are enjoying it. That's like
Yeah.
how it goes.
But look at cigarette smoking. I'm a kid of the 80s, and people were smoking everywhere in airports and movie theaters and restaurants. And I remember being on airplanes when people were smoking. And now that has now since reversed, right? That was a huge culture shift. And now they put cigarette smokers like 5,000 feet away from every
Yeah.
building. So
Yeah.
it takes a while for the culture to shift. And there's a lot of examples of cultural shifts, I think, for us in the United States. I know when I go to Europe, people still smoke a ton of cigarettes in Europe. So
Yeah.
that's pretty much the
And like
same.
Southeast Asia, they smoke a ton too, right?
I want to jump into some other questions, which I want to talk about like robotics ROI for cannabis operators. What are the concrete economic benefits operators can expect when they're integrating robotics into like their production workflow, particularly around labor and their output?
Yeah. What a lot of people generally want to find is they want to buy a machine and then that machine is going to improve their throughput and they'll be able to go from 10 people on the production line to one or two people on the production line.
Yeah.
And that's like the general sentiment. Like when someone comes and says, I want to buy this machine, it's okay, like, why do you want to buy it? And they will break it down to being either they want to decrease the amount of labor that they're putting towards the SKU, and they want to decrease the labor for one of two reasons. One, like they had very difficult times hiring for that role, and they're having a hard time like scaling up. They're like, okay, cool. Like we're really hitting, we're trending. Like we need the fire while it's hot sort of thing. But they have 8 people that maybe they like for us, we do a lot of pre-rolls, automation. Oh, we're infusing these pre-rolls. We have 8 people, but every time we hire more people, there's always like a mess. Like we can't hire people, the quality goes down, all this stuff. And our demand is like so unstable that this quarter we need 15 people, but next quarter we need 8, and we don't like using temp agencies. There's all these like
Yeah.
workforce associated things. And then the other thing is they're just trying to make things consistent because they just notice they're like things aren't consistent for them. And in the situation of the workforce, you also see places like in kind of the more mature markets like
Yeah.
Colorado, Washington, Oregon, California, where those markets are very reluctant to like adopt new technology, mostly because like they've done stuff in the past and they got burned
Yeah.
because they just bought some like Chinese knockoff thing and like it didn't work and then a bunch of money went down the drain. Or they're just like so beat up from the market that they're like, I just don't want to try anything new. I have my things and they're working now and like I have my market and I'm selling and I don't want to change anything. Um and then what ends up happening is that they do that for a couple of years. And so now we're actually seeing a lot of demands from the more mature markets
Mm.
because they're at year 9 or year 10 or something like that. And, or in like California cannabis, maybe year 7 or 8. And now they've basically been doing the same thing for the past year or two. And they haven't seen anything change
Yeah.
except their margins have just gone slowly farther and farther down. They're not falling nearly as much as before where it was like a cliff. Now it's like this like gradual kind of maturation of the whole market and the commoditization of cannabis. And so what they then go is, all right, well, I want to just improve the margin on what I'm doing. Because right now I have the same 8 people that I've had for 4 years and I can't make any more. I'm making just about as what I need to make, but like it cost me this much. So what can I do? And so that's where the return on investment normally comes from. where people are like trying to satisfy increasing demand, or they're so mature, they're trying to find some other way to have the company be profitable, where it's like they can't really increase demand, they can't really charge more. So then where do they do? What do they do? They have to figure out how to make things cost less for them. And that's where our systems come in. And that's where like most automation normally comes in.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like most people will get an ROI on the machines they buy from us in less than a year. And we
Oh,
make
wow.
sure that's where it's at. And it's always associated with like throughput, right? People are using the machine full utilization. They'll probably ROI in 4 or 5 months. But most people are making 200,000 keef coated pre-rolls a month. They're maybe making 50 or 100,000 keef. And that's the average output that we see. And we make sure that people can visualize the end and then visualize and be able to realize those ROIs within 12 months.
Yeah, and I think I was just having a conversation with someone recently about this, how I think the mature markets are often overlooked. I think there are people who get to a breaking point. There are some people who aren't going to do anything at all and it's just going to stay where they're at. But there are going to be people who have been doing it like 7, 8, 9, 10 years that are like, okay, we have to change our trajectory. We have to do something here. And then they might decide to bring in automation, or maybe they decide to buy up some distressed assets in their mature market. And maybe they decide to get into manufacturing where they weren't doing it before. Maybe they had to grow in a dispensary and they're going to acquire their own manufacturing facility. I think the mature market is so important to not forget, because I think people still need services and need equipment. There are people, maybe they have old equipment, maybe they have that crappy Chinese equipment that you talked
Yeah.
about. And I think too, 10 years ago, we didn't have people like Sorting Robot. We didn't have you guys. Everyone's learned a lot since the adult use market in 2014 in Washington and Colorado, and that you have all that information and data, and that you've been able to build the equipment, and other people have been able to do other things for cultivation. Even the overall just lights for the cultivation have improved in the
Oh,
last 10 years. And so there's equipment out there to make people more efficient and to increase the profit margins. I think there's a lot more waste. If you go back and look at the ancient equipment people were looking, even in manufacturing, and those crazy lights they were using in the grows, almost everyone's on LED nowadays.
yeah.
It'll be interesting. What do you think about? I know things could potentially change with rescheduling and the legalization. What's going to happen when these new emerging markets finally catch up and start to mature across the United States once we're all in a mature market?
So what do you think is going to happen when the whole industry is in a mature market? Well, that would require, I guess, like every state to have some sort of legal and rec and medical program.
Hmm.
I don't think it would require what a lot of people say. For you to have a mature market, you need interstate commerce, because you don't even have interstate commerce in like alcohol, right? There are some states that like you can't ship stuff to.
Oh, that's
And
true.
yeah, and like some states, the state controls the liquor stores, right? Like they're
In
package
New
stores or whatever.
Jersey.
Jersey, I think Utah has that too. But like there's
Yeah.
like, yeah, so there's these weird outliers and stuff. And so I don't think you need like interstate commerce. And then if you look at like cigarettes, like if they move from state to state, they're taxed like so incredibly heavily, right? It's like they're like 1 to 1 in terms of MSRP to taxes. So I don't think that's required. I do think that you need every state to be on, right? So then that way you give those multi-state operators a larger platform to like achieve some levels of economy of scale.
Hmm.
Maybe not on the manufacturing sense, but maybe on the raw goods sense. I think when it's all fully mature, you will probably see a market that's maybe similar to what the hemp market is right now. That's interesting. So I have a lot of customers in the hemp market. Me and one of the biggest brands in the hemp side actually integrated like the like hash hole SKU, but for hemp. And so now I support some of the biggest hemp producers in the space doing that. And they're very interesting. Yeah, one of my hemp customers will do 2, 3 million joints a month,
That
just
puts us
hash
to
holes.
shame. That's
Yeah, just
crazy.
making hash holes. And then like another one
Wow.
will do 5 million. They're shooting for 10 million by the end of this year. joints a month across the board, like blunts,
Wow.
joints, uninfused, infused, keef coated, THCA coated, whatever. And so that level of scale is for one company is like it is so large, it dwarfs every regulated company that we've ever worked with. Maybe not in the accumulation of all of their states, right? So if you look at some of the biggest brands like a Rogue or a CZ or any of these guys, if they're crushing it, let's say in pre-rolls, they're doing 1 million to 2 pre-rolls a month. And they're like at least in the top 3 in California. Because I think even Jeter's does like 3 million pre-rolls a month in
Oh,
California.
wow.
And I think that was the numbers that I saw from like last year, right? They probably do 3 million pre-rolls a month. And then like right behind them is like Steezy, which is doing like 2.5 or something like that. And then there's maybe one or two, like maybe like Paxstone, and then there's a huge gap. And then the next people are doing like 500,000 a month, right? So that's a very different market than what the hemp market's looking. Hemp
Wow.
was like interstate commerce, so there's that kind of differential. But I think it's just like the overall perspective of a fully mature market is probably best looked through the lens of the current hemp market.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's like an interesting way to look at it, which means it's basically like a tobacco or like a liquor store, like things being sold in the smoke shops. There's not a good reason why dispensaries look like iPhone stores or Apple stores. Yeah, maybe that was cool with like MedMen and they like did that, but look how that turned out, right? You need to make your dispensary be reasonable and like it's a fucking liquor store. Like it's what it is, right? And like your grow is like cool, but it's a craft brewery. Like it's a distillery. Like just call it for what it is. And I think like you'll just see like more of the reality that sets in and it'll look like hemp, I think. And I don't think hemp is like a bad thing to I don't think the hemp market as it's developed and as I see my customers work inside of it, none of them are complaining. Well, I mean,
I
they're
feel
not
like we
looking
can
now. But
learn. I feel like we can learn from the hemp market and
yeah.
the hemp industry and all the people running the hemp companies. They're producing far more. I
Yeah,
mean,
wait.
just in the numbers that you're talking about. And obviously, it's because they get direct to the door delivery and people don't want to come in the dispensary. There's some people who want to go to the smoke shop and some people who don't want to go to the smoke shop. I can buy things from a smoke shop and online and not go and have it delivered to my door. I can go in and get the experience of
Yeah.
shopping in the smoke shop. And that's where it's going to go. And I think having Apple looking dispensaries.
Yeah.
I have clients who don't have those stores. They have just good old fashioned, put American flag on the wall, like
Yeah.
just basic. And the whole back wall is just full of product on the little pegs. And they're crushing it. And it's not super bougie.
You don't need a
And
$500,000 build out for what
they
is
didn't.
practically a liquor store. Like,
Yeah, they didn't. It's just like you'd walk into a liquor store. That's what his dispensary looks like.
yeah,
And they love it though. That they like it. That's what they want. And I think and for people who don't want that, they're just going to buy online. So I feel like we could definitely learn a lot from the hemp industry, and hopefully that people will start taking that and looking at how what can we learn from the hemp industry. I think you're right. I think that's what we are going to become. We're just like you said, we're just dispensaries are going to just be like liquor stores. There's not too many fancy liquor stores. And I know you have like Total Wine, but I think they're more like a Home Depot of liquor.
yeah, they're like a Bevmo or something. That's
Yeah,
yeah, you're like a Home Depot or like a Food for Less. It's just not
a
like
Lowe's.
yeah, it's not the ground isn't sticky. That's like the biggest difference between a Bevmo and like a liquor store.
Yeah.
Like the linoleum has been replaced in the past 20 years. The biggest
Yeah. It's the same for grocery stores. You have Whole Foods or Safeways or Trader Joe's, and then you have the Kroger stores. But there's lots of fancy grocery stores, and it'll just be interesting to see. I never thought cannabis was going to be legal in my lifetime, and now I've been in the industry 17 years for me in the regulated market. And I can't even imagine when it's going to be 10 years from now. I'm going to be sitting
yeah.
back laughing, going, oh my gosh, this is so crazy looking back on everything. So yeah, that I thought that was really helpful what you shared. I kind of want to talk about customization versus standardization. And cannabis markets often demand these SKU varieties like sizes, strains, infused products. So how are operations able to adapt to that variable without sacrificing the consistency?
Yeah, this is something I dealt with a lot, like when I was running a co-packing company, because we'd have to package like 8 different strains of flour in these jars, and then we'd have to variable package each one of them, and they'd want 10,000 jars of this strain, and then 3,000 jars of that strain, and,
Wow.
this harvest came out half as many pounds as the other one, and so then they couldn't do their full run because some of it, like, got messed up or whatever, and I think that variability is gonna persist for a pretty long time just because it's so inherent with the plant. There's a lot of arguments against that. I know I talked with one guy who was talking about how there's a bunch of strains of tobacco, but
Mm,
the United States uses what's called like the American blend or something like that. And it's a blend of 3 different strains. And that's just what they settled on for the past like 70 years or something like that.
wow.
And his argument was like cannabis will go the same way. And I was like, maybe. And if it does, it'll be in like 50 years. Like, like you're talking about an industry like tobacco that's been around for a millennia contiguously. And then cannabis, which is just basically starting out. So I think for the foreseeable future, we're going to see a lot of variability because it just takes a long time to squash out the variability. You can see that variability also in, like bananas too. I don't know if like most bananas are just a single strain and all the bananas are like there's like this virus that's like affecting bananas and affecting the production of bananas all over the world. So it's because it's like single strain. But bananas are also like 1,000 years old. Also.
Tomatoes too, right? Because aren't
Oh, is
there,
there a tomato one as well?
are they single strain or, because they also have heirloom and then there's regular
I
tomatoes.
think there's more strains commonly available of tomatoes than there are
Yeah,
bananas. I think bananas, there's one in that
that is
the United States
crazy.
generally buys, but there's hundreds, just like there's cannabis and there's all these variants, but like no one really grows any of them except like this like one strain of banana. And we can talk bananas for an hour, but the idea is that it takes time for that variability to leave the industry. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing that variability leaves the industry? Like, probably it's a bad thing as things expand, like it's what happens. And I think it just follows trends. Like beer has had its own resurgence in the past like 15
Sure.
years where like now there's all these craft breweries and there's all this variability. But if you look at the 30 years before that, there wasn't really any variability. So I think it like comes and goes.
That's
All
so
that being
true.
said,
There was no
gonna be
good
different.
beer back
Yeah,
when I
right.
was younger.
And then now there's so many different types.
There's so many different types of beer and alcohol too. There's like more craft, which that wasn't really around.
Mhm.
I have watched actually a couple videos about tobacco strains and the different varieties. And I was learning about tobacco houses and just the process of how they cure them. And I thought it was interesting. It reminded me a lot of cannabis. I can't imagine us going down to 3 strains because that would remind me of the 90s back when I feel like the only cannabis I was ever getting was Northern Lights back in those days. And that's all that every dealer was selling.
Some dude had a big harvest and he was trying to get out. He's trying to get rid of all his northern lights.
It just seemed like
Um,
a lot of the same strains, but
yeah,
I feel like there's so many genetics though with cannabis. There's so many different things out there.
I don't know what it's like in Colorado, but in California, a lot of the flour is like, and it's market driven, right? Like a lot of the flour is like this like candy gas, but it's like GG4, sour diesel, and then every goddamn variant of gelato that you could possibly find, and like Girl Scout cookies. Yo, if I like, we infuse joints and we'll give them to our customer to show them like how it works. And we'll buy an ounce of flour or something like that and make 5 or 10 of these things. And then when my marketing team was, oh, what should we get? I'm like, I don't know, but it just like can't be a gelato cookies cross, like anything except that. And like
So
there are like
true.
really great strains, but it's weird because there's a lot of kind of like ownership with the strains that sometimes is like the Achilles heel of the strain itself. There's this one strain and I fucking can't find it anymore. And I loved it. And it was called a blueberry oatmeal. I
Ooh,
shit you not. It is the best strain of cannabis
I love
I've ever
blueberry.
tasted. And it sounds like it's like a candy gas sort of thing, but it's not. It literally tastes like a bowl of cereal. Like more than cereal milk, the strain take like it tastes like you took oatmeal and blueberries and
Wow.
putting in a blender, it tastes like that. Like it tastes like that when you breathe it in, and when you breathe it out, it tastes like Lucky Charms.
Oh my
It's
God.
crazy sweet. And I was only able to buy some for a year or two, and then the farm got acquired, and then they shut the farm down. And then I was like, "Who's the grower? Who has this damn str-" right?" And you just can't find it. And so there's a lot of benefit to the variability. And so I think it's gonna stay. You're gonna at least the next like 15 or 20 years, like we will
Yeah.
not be talking about the collapse of variability in our like careers. But that being said, it's always gonna be a problem for manufacturers, at least in this generation of
Yeah.
early cannabis market. And I think the biggest problem that manufacturers run into when they deal with the high variability is that they just don't have very good processes to
Oh,
and a lot of that is about the immaturity of both the operator, the market, like the supply chain, right? As all of those mature, high variability becomes more of a doable situation. But that's something that like I ran into like super intimately when we did my co-packing company, and how we make all of our machines. We make them specifically to do a very wide range. I think that's a big reason why we are successful with our systems, and why like Chico, we launched that machine like 4 years ago, and it's still
yeah.
like number one infusion machine in the market that probably infuses like more than half, if not more, if not 70% plus of those hash bowl joints like in the world. And we haven't really changed it for 3 years because like we built it to satisfy the market's demand and like what it's gonna need. And yeah, we still have, I don't know, now we have 4 or 5 different knockoff machines that compete with us. But yeah, they're just like shadows of it because they designed it for one thing, or they designed it for this part of the market. But if you do that, yes, like you will satisfy the need for some people, but eventually those people will mature and need something else, and then they'll probably buy my machine. Or you will ignore a large part of the operators in the space. And
Yeah.
and I think that is a very big flaw. And I think I see a lot of manufacturers make that decision and they just ignore large parts of the market. Okay, a good example of this is so our Stardust is like a keef coating machine. And so we built it to work with any type of pre-roll, which is kind of like the baseline. But we built it to also be able to use glue because people will use Arabic gum based glue, like cigar glue.
Yeah.
They'll spray or they'll coat the outside of the joint with the like cigar glue, and then they'll coat it in keef and then let the cigar glue dry. And then all you're left is like with tree gum and then keef. Um, but a lot of the market also uses distillate, and they either dip their joints in distillate or spray distillate,
Yeah.
whatever, and then they coat it in key for THC after that. But so I knew this. We made our machine, and one of the requirements for our machine was like we have to make it so that you can use both. Like it needs to be able to use both because otherwise we're just going to ignore 30 or 40% of the
Yeah.
market.
Yep.
And so we did that, and now we sell machines that are tuned for keef, and some are tuned for distillate, and some that are tuned for glue, and we have maybe 1 or 2 customers that do both, and they like swap out the tooling, and they can do both in one system. And that's you design for high variability. But like some of the customers that we or some of the other kind of new competitors to that space that we've seen, like just in MJ Biscone, there were 2 machines that got released that are supposed to compete with Stardust when before there was nothing really there. Um, and I guess those were like the prototypes, so maybe they'll be like full fledged in 6 or 9. But they only do glue, so they're just ignoring 40% of the market because 40% of the market uses distillate,
Yeah.
and
It's true. They
they
do.
just like don't. They're just not servicing. And why? Because it's hard. But yeah, that's why you get paid for it to solve the hard problems.
It's true.
So you have to make sure that you service a variable market because the market is variable, and to try to say this tool is only going to work for this group and eventually the whole market will go that way is short-sighted, almost like disrespectful to parts of the market that like are not doing what you're servicing.
That's really interesting. I never looked at it from that perspective because obviously I'm more on the operations and compliance side of things.
Yeah.
So it's good to have somebody like yourself come in and give that input because maybe some operators aren't even thinking about that or manufacturers aren't even realizing that they can solve that problem. And I would like to say with California in general, it has definitely influenced Colorado with strains. And it seems like whatever you guys do first, like it takes us 1 to 2 years to catch up.
Yeah,
I
I've
feel
heard.
I don't know what happens. I feel like somebody from Colorado goes to California and brings stuff back, or they're getting seeds because we get your strains. We had Girl Scout cookies. We didn't come up with Girl Scout cookies. Everybody knew those strains were coming from California. I'm old school. I like the blueberry or like Blue Dream and the diesels and classics like White Widow. And those are really becoming hard to find now.
Yeah, like
Very hard to find.
Tropicana. You can't find Tropicana Punch
Oh,
anymore.
yeah, I remember Tropicana Punch.
Yeah, and that is like probably the
Cotton
most
Candy, Romulan, like, I some of these you can't find anymore.
yeah, and those, but it's because of the market's driving them away. Because a Tropicana Punch, you'll never get above 16% on a Tropicana Punch because the most of the trichome is dedicating volume to terpenes because the terpene percentage on the Tropicana Punch is like 14%. It's like a crazy number, but because there's no THC in it, basically, it's like the THC level is like super low. Like on average, you'll get like 12 to 14% on a very good high yielding strain of Tropicana Punch. But like, how are you going to sell that? No one's going to buy it, right? No one's going to buy it at 14% and be like, oh, this is good. This tastes so good. It has like such a cool terpene profile. They're going to be like, why isn't it 25?
That's really interesting you brought that up because I had on some nurses on one of my previous episodes where we were talking about more the medical market,
Yeah.
and they're saying that patients want those types of strains with the lower THC that some people and they can't find them anywhere. There are people who just want the lower percentages and how we're all trained to shop high THC in the cannabis industry.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe the medical market or the refinement of the medical market will bring back some of these other strains because
I
the
hope
medical market
so.
is not so focused on like getting blitzed. It's
Mm-mm.
focused on the entourage and whole terpene effect and also, yeah,
Symptoms and
yeah.
pain management. So it maybe it will push people to start growing lower THC flower for at least the patients in the medical market. And we still have thriving medical cannabis markets across the United States. And we have medical markets that haven't even really begun yet, like in Alabama and some of these other places that are just doing medical only, like Nebraska's getting ready to do medical only.
Arkansas is medical only.
Yeah, not everyone is adult use, and it's interesting the directions that each one is going in, adult versus medical. I wanted to talk about regulatory compliance in manufacturing a little bit, and with each state's regulation being unique, what operational challenges have you seen cannabis manufacturers face, and how can automation mitigate those compliance risks? And I think you could give a unique perspective because you were plant touching, you also did co-packing, and so you have been on every side of the coin.
Yeah, this is actually a big thing that I try to tell my customers when we're first talking, like, and they're deciding, oh, do I want to buy this equipment or not? It's that every state has some form of metric or biotrack or whatever. And a part of that is like track and trace, or no, all of that is track and trace. And so you need to be able to continuously track your plant throughout the whole manufacturing process. And if you're doing it by hand, then you're tracking it by hand. And if you're tracking it by hand, it's probably on a notepad or something, or a spreadsheet or something.
So
And
true.
it's not immutable. It's not always accurate, and it creates a lot of problems. And manufacturing, especially in the mature market, it's death by a thousand cuts, right? Like you think, okay, that guy just has to like transfer from the clipboard to metric, or oh, he just needs to like write it into the spreadsheet and then paste it over there, or oh, he just has to collect it. Yeah, it's every one of those things that he has to do. There's 500 of them that he has to do every week. And if one of them gets messed up, then it creates a problem. And like you lose $1,000 or you lose $10,000
Mm,
or spend 2 or 3 hours because you create a package and then you split that package and then you say that package has labels printed out, but then like those labels were the wrong labels. And then it propagates all the way back up and you have to do all of this stuff
oh
all
my
over again.
gosh.
And so, and I say that because we had to do that. Right? We intimately had these problems initially at my co-packing company. And so when you get automation, you're able to cut out a very large chunk of that, right? At least with automation that's like IoT and there's endpoints and like webhooks that you can pull into data. And And that's how all of our systems are. I think most of the systems are like that. I know a lot of them will track stuff, but it's like difficult to get at. For us, we try to make it very easy because I was in that situation, right? Where I, at the end of the day, I talked to my team, like, how many joints did we do? Because we have to like close out metric for the day. And we need to say, like, how many packages are we breaking this pound of flour into? And they're like, oh, it's on the clipboard. I'm like, cool. Where's the clipboard? They're like, oh, Travis has it. Okay. Where's Travis? Travis left early for dentist appointments. Okay, then where the fuck is the clipboard? Because we need to close out metric for the day. And you're like, I don't know, we got to look for it. And it's just like,
Oh
oh my God.
no.
As opposed to like use some automation to do that same process. Oh, how many did we do? It's, oh, okay. Let me look on the dashboard. Oh, okay. We did like this many. Where are they? Oh, they're in that bin. All right, cool. I think the chance of them being in that bin being the same as the number here is pretty fucking high. I don't know, unless you did something by hand and snuck it in the bin, it's probably the same number. So that just allows you to improve your kind of efficiency in not just like this like labor perspective, but in the operational perspective. I don't
Inventory
know.
control. It sounds like really good inventory control and
Yeah, you
management.
you also just like drag information from like the process to the inventory to like the regulatory track and trace. Like that makes your life so much easier. It's like wow.
I can't believe the clipboard story that you just shared. And I bet you probably like at least 30 to 40% of people in the United States right now are experiencing that same scenario in their manufacturing
Oh, for
facility.
sure, for
And
sure.
I know they are because I know not everyone is using automation and they're
Yeah.
still walking around with clipboards, like you said, dragging this information where I think it's great to go on and have a dashboard and have all that data. It sounds like it is really good inventory control, which for me is important in compliance. I kind of want to dive in just real quick about the future of cannabis manufacturing and looking ahead. How do you see the role of robotics and AI evolving in the cannabis space over the next 3 to 5 years? And what will operations look like? Or even if you think it's going to be changing here in the next year, AI is moving very fast right now.
Yeah, I think AI will be the cornerstone of being able to handle the high variability that the cannabis industry demands
Hmm.
because automation hates variability.
Oh,
Like Coke, Coke had one flavor for 60 years, right? And then even now, like there's 5 flavors of Coke and maybe 3 that are widely distributed. It's because automation hates variability. Like you can't make a million of something and then just switch. It's really difficult. But cannabis is the opposite problem, right? Where it has a lot low volumes, but it also has a very high SKU count and variability count. And that's where AI comes in and it can help robotics because AI takes the place of the decision making that a human would do, but it does it for the cost of 95% less of what a human
mm,
would need to do. So it allows you to scale, but also allows you to take in the variability. So I think AI is like the cornerstone of success of the industry. And in terms of automation, I think you'll probably see, I would say within the next 5 years, or maybe let's say 2030, however Schedule 3 turns out,
yeah.
there won't be a single company that is operating profitably without the use of automation as a core function of their business.
Wow.
And the reason why that is because I don't know a single food manufacturer that isn't just a building full of automation.
Yeah.
And it's just because you can't achieve any scale
Yeah.
and you can't do it in a commoditized market. And it just doesn't make any sense.
It's a
And
reality check, honestly.
yeah. And yeah, like I think that's where it's gonna go. I think the sooner people understand or the sooner people like embrace it'll help them in the long run and it'll just help the industry itself mellow out.
Yeah, I agree. And wrapping up, I wanted to know if there's any kind of practical advice or tips that you have for operators.
Yeah, I think my most practical advice to operators is going to be whether you're in a mature market or whether you're in a new market that just started, the biggest risk to a manufacturer or a co-packer or a brand is like broken up into 2 parts. One, it's counterparty risk. So like your customers are a risk to you, your supply chain is a risk to you. And the second part is that it's like a death by 1,000 cuts for the companies that die. And like I've been on the plant touching side and the ancillary side for so long that I've seen many companies come and go. I would say the best run companies that like when I walk in there, I'm like, damn, that is a good company. Those companies don't die. Like those companies, and it's not that like they're some sort of unachievable level of proficiency. They're just making sure like they're not in those situations with Travis fucking up the clipboard. Like,
Yeah.
and that's all there is to it. It's not that achieving the regulatory hurdles or finding the efficiencies are like so impossible. It's just that like you have to be aware of it, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. And if you avoid the 1,000 cuts, then like you will be around for a very long time. I don't know how much money you'll make because it depends a lot on the market and like a whole bunch of other variables, but you won't be dead.
Yeah.
And I think making sure that like your vendors, your supply chain, your customers, those are all risk points and you value them as such. But they're part of those 1,000 cuts. And I don't think people really they think everything's gonna a silver bullet, right? If I have a good harvest, this is gonna crush it. I'm gonna have a bunch of money and I'll be able to do stuff. Or if I buy this machine, it's gonna be like the best thing ever and it's gonna solve all my problems. And there's no silver bullet. It's gonna be a death by 1,000 cuts. And as long as you service all of those cuts effectively, like you'll be around for a very long time.
Yeah. I really like what you said that it comes down to not being Travis with the clipboard. And it seems so complicated, but it's actually really simple. It's really just a standard. It's no different than saying we're going to be OSHA ready and OSHA compliant, or I'm going to be metric compliant. And you come across people who have extremely clean metric and inventory tracking where they
Yeah.
have no issues. And then you have people who have tons of issues. They don't
Yeah.
even finish any of their packages and they leave open harvest batches. And it's just crazy stuff that happens. And it's really simple. Do you want to introduce the standard and be a company with longevity?
Yeah. But like that standard is not, it's not high. I will tell you that like our
It's not.
bar is not super high, but there is a bar, and you have to understand that like
Yeah.
the road to get to that bar is very slippery. But as long as you like walk confidently, you will get there. But if you're like over here freaking out, like following through the path, like you're never gonna get there, right? So
Yeah. Gosh, so much valuable information. I'm so glad that you're in the cannabis industry and that you came over to working with all of us here. I think it's really incredible your contribution and what you guys are doing over there at Sorting Robotics. And I really appreciate you being a guest. And for those listening, I will have Nohtal's information in the description box. And then the podcast is available on Apple and Spotify, wherever you like to listen. And then also you can check out Under the Microscope with Jenny on YouTube and subscribe, and you can watch the videos on the YouTube channel. So thanks again for being here, Nohtal. You were an awesome guest, and I'm excited for listeners to get to hear everything that you have to say.
cool. Yeah, me too. It was great being here. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, thanks.